Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to this edition of the Pest Geek podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek, and I've got a very good interview today. But before that, I wanted to cover a couple of things with you guys and bring you up to date. The Pest Geek Academy is coming along. However, it is taking a lot longer than we thought. We're still recording classes. We're still dealing with quizzes and setting up that infrastructure. So bigger undertaking than I thought, but that is coming. So stay tuned to that. You can always find out what is happening with that class or the lessons that we're putting up at the Academy by going to pestgeekpodcast.com and going to training. There you will find the Academy that is being built. And so we're working on that infrastructure. But this is a little bit more than I anticipated originally to get all this done. So letting you know about that. Also, hey, if you guys appreciate what we're doing here, you appreciate what I'm doing, what Stephen Van Tassel is doing, trying to bring you the best free content and be the world's #1 pest control training podcast that is free. If you enjoy it, hey, would you consider donating, supporting us? It's easy. Just go to pestgeekpodcast.com, hit the donate button, and whatever you feel that this podcast is worth to you, go ahead and support us. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it. And without further ado, here is our guest.
Thanks, Frank. Stephen Van Tassel here with another episode of Living the Wildlife. Wanted to talk today about criticizing state associations or even national associations. This topic came up on some correspondence that I had with a person, and I thought, this might be something that would be useful for the Pest Geek podcast. Let me put some cards on the table. I am a founding member. By that I mean I was in the room when the association was decided to be formed. That's the National Wildlife Control Operators Association. I've been a member of multiple trapping associations and also both at national and state level. And I've also been I'm also a board member right now of the National Wildlife Control Operators Association. So, I'm biased, but as I've probably said before, just because I'm biased doesn't make me wrong. One of the things we always have to think about bias is, do we have the right bias? And if you think you don't quite understand that, let me ask you a question, which would be, it's a bias to say someone's innocent before they've been proven guilty. That's a bias. So let me ask you the question, is that a good bias to have in our court system, or is that a bad bias? I'm hoping you're going to say that's a good bias, but it's a bias because you're prejudiced to believe that the person's innocent until they're proven guilty. That's a bias. So you can see that being biased doesn't necessarily make you wrong. However, but I think it's important to lay your cards on the table, at least some of them, and that's what I've done here. But I want to talk a little bit about complaints for associations, and so let me just sort of state straight away, look, is every association perfect? No. Is every association knocking it out of the park? No. However, sometimes the criticisms of associations lack proper perspective and context. Let me kind of unpack what that means a little bit. When we talk about an association and why it's not why it's failing to do what you think the association should be doing, you have to ask the question, what are the challenges and goals present for that association? In other words, your goal, your issue as a business owner may be you want to have the ability to hire workers that can't simply get trained by you and go off in 5 minutes later and start their own business. Maybe that's a piece of legislation or regulatory work that's very important for you and you're passionate about it. And that is an important issue for a business owner, to be sure. However, if the association is struggling with an issue such as, is my state going to ban rodenticides or major categories of rodenticides, or require pest control operators to get permission from neighbors to spray the lawn with an insecticide or an herbicide, that may be a bigger issue for the association than whether or not you can control where your workers go after they leave your company. So it's not that your issue is not valid or considered important by the association, but it's not going to be their number one priority, perhaps. And so sometimes people get angry and they claim that the association is useless, it doesn't do anything, it's not worth the money. I mean, you hear the mantra probably all the time. But you have to ask, but no one seems to ask the other question, which says, is this the biggest fish on the plate to be dealt with? You may say, well, can the association walk and chew gum at the same time? Well, that depends. It depends on how much money is involved. It depends how much time is involved. So one of the things before we criticize the association for lack of, as a do-nothing, stealing my money organization, you have to ask the question, what exactly are your goals and how do they apply to the goals of the association? For example, if you're dealing with a national organization, there could be an issue in another state that is taking priority over your state. And it doesn't mean that your state's not valuable, but we only have so much time in a day, and there's only so much money. I mean, this is one of the sad things that people have to understand, that if you're in a state where there's 2 members, is that going to carry the same kind of weight as a state that has 100 members? Now, it doesn't mean that the National Association wants to ignore you, but that, again, when it comes to priorities, there's only so much that can be done. Now, for those of you who aren't members, this is the other thing that I find fascinating, and I've experienced this personally, is I'll get a call from an individual, and he says, I'm having this particular problem, and we need someone to fix this. And so sometimes in the conversation, I'll ask, in this situation, I actually did. And I said, well, are you a member of the National? I said, well, if we had enough members in our association, we'd have the money and the power to do some of those things. Because this was sort of lower down the list of priorities. There were bigger issues involved in the association than what this person was dealing with. But his concern was important. But he wasn't a member. You see, he wanted the National Association, he wanted my association, the association I belong to deal with his problem, even though he wasn't a member for the last 10 years. Since we founded. And it's sort of like, but yet we're supposed to drop everything and come help him out. Does that make any sense? Or is that just a form of corporate welfare? I'm always fascinated by the number of people who will bang the table about big government and we need to get regulations off our back, and yet They won't join their association, but they expect the association to drop everything and solve their problem when they're a non-member. Well, let me kind of lay some things out for you here. And I'm not speaking for the National Association here. So if you think, go complain to them, whatever you want. I mean, the fact that I'm not speaking for NUCO here. I'm speaking as my individual from my own experience. I'm not being a mouthpiece for the NUCO at this point, but I'm simply explaining some things from my perspective. That it does seem odd that someone who's not a member of the association thinks that an association should spend all this money just for them. I don't know. That sounds to me like corporate welfare. And if you're against welfare for layabouts, then I think you should be against welfare for corporate layabouts. People that aren't participating, because it certainly seems to me that I'm going to work harder for people that are members than a person who isn't a member. And just to be clear, NUCOA has done things for non-members. We've contributed money to fight certain ballot initiatives that didn't affect us directly, but would affect us over time. Certain ballot initiatives that trying to ban this, ban that would affect our industry, and we've participated in that. But we saw an interest for our members or for the future that we didn't want a cascade system, but we'd have individual people come in and they're wanting all this, that, and the other thing. It's like, well, where were you? You weren't contributing anything, but you want us to drop, as I would sarcastically say, you want us to drop $1 million into your state. Where were you? So I think I've banged that drum a little bit, but it is a bit irritating, and I think it's a bit disingenuous for people to bash an association, and yet they're not participating in it, and they weren't contributing to the financial success. Because let me be blunt with you. Politicians look at numbers, okay? People with the numbers have power. Why do you think the NRA has so much power? Whether you agree with the NRA or not, it doesn't matter at this point. I'm just using it as an illustration. Why do they have so much power? They have so much power because they have a vibrant, large membership that is extraordinarily vocal, and they put money behind what they're doing, and they vote. Okay, so they have incredible power. You could put out another organization. How about Planned Parenthood, the patron saint of the baby killing industry, right? So that is that. Why do they have so much power? Because there's a lot of people that pour money into that organization and who support the ideology of that particular group. Okay, that's how things work. And so when you don't participate, even just as a regular membership, say, oh, I'm not doing anything, I'm just members. The numbers matter, because when a letter is written to a politician or when a policy is being opposed, the person writing, the association writing the letter can say, our 500 members are against this. You may say, well, it's only 500. Yes, but it's the economic power behind your association as well. That when you are able to say, I'll give an illustration. This is a bit dated at this point, but when there was a study done in Connecticut, it was just not very scientific, but it was just sort of a quick review. And it found that of all the wildlife control operators in the state of Connecticut, 10 companies, or 10 licensed individuals, I should say, did 90% of the work. So even if an association only has a small portion of the potential licensees, and most pest control associations only have a small fraction of the total number of people that are licensed, they often have, not always, and so they often have the best, the biggest, if not the best, then the biggest. Okay. So that means something when they go to a politician and they say, we oppose this. Okay. Because there's value behind that, because politicians have to make decisions based on how they think the political winds blow. Now, you may hate that, but the reality is politics is about power. Sorry, that's just the facts. Okay. If you think it's about truth, oh gosh. No, that's not what politics is about. Politics has never been about the truth. Okay. It's about power. Either you have it or you don't. And a lot of times people have power, but they've given it up to somebody else. And then they complain that they don't have it. Okay, that's how things work. So the next issue in terms of understanding goals is that there's a difference between your goals as a private company and the goals of the association. So sometimes people get angry at associations because they want something that's going to benefit their company but harm the industry. And again, it's a form of corporate welfare, right? Because business, and it's understandable, businesses want to do things on the basis of helping their business, even if it harms the industry as a whole. And sometimes people miss that because sometimes entrepreneurs get a little blinded. They're chasing that dollar, they're chasing that brass ring, they're looking for all these types of ways to grow their business, and they forget that sometimes the decisions that they're making are going to help their business, but they're going to crush the rest of the industry. Okay? And have sometimes a competitive advantage over someone else. And sometimes the association is going to oppose that. And so then the association becomes this bad boy, bad organization ripping me off, when in fact you were just trying to get the association to support something that would enrich you at the expense of everybody else. Again, these are tough questions. These are tough issues. And sometimes we don't really self-reflect enough because it's hard to self-reflect, right? Who wants to criticize themselves? And sometimes in our industry, to be fair, people say a lot of stuff, they talk a lot of trash without a lot of evidence. Okay. So other types of issues would be what do you want out of your association? Some associations are designed not to be so much political, but they just want to offer training. It's just a way to offer training, and the association's more of a club than a true political power. Now, that to my mind is a legitimate disagreement. If you want your association to be more political and your association in your state wants to be more educational, well, then that's a legitimate difference. That means your goals are going to differ from those of the association, and that may require either you getting on the board or petitioning the board to change its perspective or to broaden its perspective. That's a fair disagreement, right? But sometimes an organization is only doing education because it's too small to go political. So it's the chicken or the egg, right? You may say, well, I'm not going to join this organization until it goes political. And the organization may say, we can't afford to go political until we have more members. So which is it? And so that's where that type of decision has to come. Let me move to a different one, different element. So we've talked about understanding the difference in goals, the goals that are yours as an individual versus those of the association. And that causes conflicts. Some of those conflicts, I believe, are legitimate. Some of them are really based on where you want an association to do something for you, even if you're not participating, even if you're not involved, sometimes even if you're not a member. And so therefore you're angry because you didn't get what you want. But the second element I want to talk about is timeline. And this is something I think that's very difficult for a lot of entrepreneurs to understand, particularly when we get to the political side, the lobbying side of an association. Many entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs because they hate being told what to do. A friend of mine said this really cogently, and I think it crystallized it perfectly for me. And he said, I'm self-employed because I figured out I'm a bad employee. I don't like being told what to do. That was it. I thought that was one of the most honest, forthright, self-aware statements that I'd heard in a while. It was amazing. It put a light on in my head. And the fact is, that's what a lot of entrepreneurs are. And some of them, they would make more money at McDonald's, to be quite blunt about it. They'd have vacation time. They might have some benefits if they put in enough hours. But because they hate being told what to do, it's an ego thing. They're going to go off on themselves and be their own entrepreneur. Hey, that's America. You can do that. But where it comes to an association where you have to work with people who differ from you, it's very different. They're difficult when you have all these type A personalities, my way or the highway. how do you work with them on a committee? So things become very personal. One of the points I've learned in my industry, for instance, and that is a lot of guys are very passionate, very black and white. If you agree with me, I love you. If you disagree with me, I hate you. It's an all or nothing proposition. You can't ever disagree with someone and still be friends. It's just a balkanized world. Now, thankfully, I think some of those elements are changing. I think our industry is maturing in that regard, but it certainly has elements of that, and it's very painful when your overall vision, but some people are such purists, if you disagree with them on one point, it could be minute, and it doesn't matter, you're dead to them. So that is going to be a problem, obviously, in terms of perspective, but let's get to that time frame issue. Entrepreneurs often make a decision and it's immediately enacted. You want to get a new tool, you buy the new tool. When you're dealing with a committee, when you're dealing with an association, it's harder to turn that ship on a dime. Entrepreneurs in a speedboat. An association is a battle cruiser. You're not going to just simply turn that battle cruiser around in 2 seconds. Why is it taking so long? I wanted this to be done. Why isn't this being taken care of? This is taking too long. Because things take time when you're trying to make policies. Things take time when you're creating trainings. Things take time when you're trying to lobby. And this is something that many PCOs and WCOs do not understand. I use the analogy of this. I said it took the government over 40 years to demonize cigarettes. Now the poor, talk about a persecuted class. Cigarette people, they're out huddling out in front of the door, in front of the business, and they're huddling in the cold, trying to get a smoke before they go back inside. We basically ostracize these people, right? Because they're evil, they're bad. I'm not a cigarette Nazi. I don't want people smoking, but the fact of the matter is a lot of cigarette Nazis out there. They think cigarettes are the most evil thing in the world. Not true, but that's how they're demonized. Okay? But it took the government 40 years. How long is your time horizon when it comes to the association trying to make change, political change? Do you know how hard it is to make political change, like in the wildlife community? It takes an enormous amount of work. We're looking at, wildlife laws being changed in various states. You want to know why these laws are being changed? The animal rights protest industry has been working on this stuff since the 1920s. How's that for a time horizon? Is that your time horizon? Do you have that kind of dedication for your industry? Or are you too worried about what your next quarter profits are going to be like? So again, it's a matter of perspective and timing, because many entrepreneurs, if they don't get an immediate return, it's done, we're going to flush this, we're going to move on. Well, associations can't work like that. It's an institution. It takes time to build relationships. It takes money to build relationships. And it has to have enough people to push behind that. It takes energy to move governments and government policies. But again, a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand that. They just want, why isn't this being done? Well, I'm sorry. We don't have dictatorships in America. It takes time. It takes money. It takes people to get some of these things done. Let me talk again. The third topic would be the importance of people needing to understand themselves. So point number 1 is understand your goals. Are your goals in alignment with the association? Number 2, understand the time frame. The time frame for change that the association has in what reality dictates is probably not going to match yours, because your time frame is you're used to things happening on a dime. That's not the way things work in politics. But then the other issue is understanding yourself, and I've alluded to this earlier, and that is the importance of recognizing ego. Again, entrepreneurs tend to be type 1 personalities, my way or the highway. And they often, when they come together in a committee, they clash. Sometimes they clash over some of the stupidest things. I know the joke in my theological background, the joke is what a church is split over. They split over the color of the carpet. Now, that's obviously sarcastic, sure. There's some truth to that, but it's not really the color of the carpet. It's that you have personalities in an organization where they can't look past their own ego, and then it becomes an issue of my ideas are the best because they're mine, and if you don't accept my idea as the best, then you're insulting me and I now hate you. Now, many people obviously aren't thinking that way that clearly, because they get the heat of the emotion in their ideas, and then they start lashing out to people and destroying personalities, and then their ego, because it no longer becomes the issue, it becomes the issue of winning, even though they don't even care about the idea anymore. Hopefully that's none of you in my sound of my voice here, but I suspect you've encountered those types of personalities in one way or another, where the topic of the original debate is no longer in focus, but it becomes a pissing match between two individuals. And you're like, really? Is this what the fight is about? That's that ego side, because we need to understand ourselves when we're dealing with people. Personalities are a problem. Have you ever walked into a room and just saw someone and you're like, I don't like that person. You don't even know them. Has that ever happened to you? You're like, they just seem shifty. There's just some sort of a feeling that comes over you. Well, that happens in life. We're human, right? So we have prejudices. We don't treat everyone the same way. We do have biases that are often negative in our life, where we don't give people the benefit of the doubt. And that's kind of what I'm getting at here. There's a need for some emotional intelligence, is where we need to understand ourselves and understand how do we relate to people, and are we giving people a fair hearing? Let me give you an illustration. Let's say you're walking into a room and you're seeing a guy who has more tattoos. You don't know whether you should say hi to him or read him, because there's so many tattoos on him. And he's got enough earrings to set off multiple metal detectors 10 feet away. What kind of an attitude do you have toward that person? Is that someone that you would be able to have a conversation with and be on a committee with and talk with them? Or is your prejudice about who that person is because of other experiences that you had with other people that had tattoos that you ultimately didn't like? And it cuts both ways. You may have someone who walks in and you're like, why is this person wearing a tie? What makes him so special? Why does he have such airs? Why does he talk with such big words? It cuts both ways. But this is how we need to understand each other. And this is the personality side. Because again, entrepreneurs are loners. They're type A personalities. They want to be in charge. They're leading. They'll go it alone. They're not always team people. And so that personality trait has many positive aspects to it, because it allowed you the drive to go it alone and go through the slings and arrows of starting your own business. But the downside of that is sometimes we don't know when to turn it off. That now we're in not winning phase. We're trying to work for a group of people, an association level. Sometimes, again, our ego gets in the way of a committee's due diligence. You have an idea. You think the association should go down road A. Someone else on the committee thinks it should go down road B. And you don't have a way of managing the conflict. How is this decision going to be made? with the facts available on the table. Because if you're on a committee, if you're on a board, association leaders need to make due diligence, because otherwise they're failing a fiduciary responsibility to their members. I know I'm talking a lot of legal language here. The point is ultimately that the association can be sued if it's deemed that the association hasn't reflected deeply enough about decisions that are made. So that's part of the reason why associations are slow. So you're looking at the outside of the association and you're yelling and you're like, why is this going so slow? And sometimes, again, I'm not saying every association is awesome or associations are always right. That's not my point here. My point is to focus on when we're criticizing associations, and I've been critical of associations. Are we giving them enough time to do the job? Is our time horizon fair to them? Are we dealing with our personality conflicts? Are we dealing with our agenda versus what the association's agenda is? And have we reflected on that? What is the nature of our conflict? So my point is, when you're angry at an association, we want to be sure you're angry with the association for justifiable reasons. That's my point here. And frankly, sometimes people need to participate in the association to help change it, because sometimes the association needs a kick in the pants. I don't know. I don't know your association, right? But what I'm saying is that there are barriers. And then again, you're dealing with oftentimes board members that are not being paid. They're volunteers. So how many hours do you think they're going to put into this? I've known board members whose businesses have suffered because of the energy they put into the association. And so by suffered, I mean they've lost money because they were working on association issues rather than their own business. Now you can say, well, they volunteered for that. Yes, but probably not to that extent. And so there needs to be some compassion at times for them, and asking, is there a way that you can help be part of that process? So I know I've been on a pretty heavy soapbox here today. And let me reiterate again, because I'll probably get some criticism for this. Look, I'm not saying that associations are always right. But I'm simply asking that before you criticize an association for not doing something you think it should be doing, ask yourself the question, are my goals the goals of the association at this time? Are my goals really high enough on the agenda? Now, maybe they should be. I don't know. But you need to be fair, because many associations can't do multiple things at once. They simply don't have the money and they simply don't have the time. So that's point number one. Number two, do you have the appropriate time frame involved? Are you giving the association enough time to get this job done? Or are you looking for instant results that just simply is unrealistic? It's sort of like someone saying, I have a bat problem. I want you to fix it in 15 minutes. And the house is, let's say 10,000 square feet. Is that going to be possible? Why can't you do it? You're a professional. Okay, you get my point here. And number three, you need to know yourself. Is this a personality problem? Did someone offend you at the meeting because maybe they didn't stroke your ego well enough? Maybe because you're angry with someone on that association, and then you're transferring your anger for that individual and blaming the entire association. Are there other issues involved about your personality? Are you giving the committees due time to do their due diligence for a particular topic? That's something that you have to think about. I'm hopeful that you will participate in your associations. I'm hopeful that you will be a positive change for that. They do need your help. And sometimes they do need a kick in the pants. And ultimately, look, it's a business decision. You need to make the business decision, is joining an association, even as a member, because membership matters. It does help an association, even if you don't do anything. That membership helps, believe it or not. You need to make a decision whether it's worthwhile for you, but understand that when the time comes, when there's a big issue, don't come running to the association to quote unquote solve the problem when you weren't a member all these years prior. I hope you think about that. Again, I'm Stephen Van Tassel, Wildlife Control Consultant. And hey, would love to hear some tips about some topics you like to have. I've already received some from one fine gentleman. Those topics will be coming. I want to tell you how much I appreciated your list. It was a fine list, and I will be hitting those topics here soon. But this one came up, and so I wanted to be sure to cover this. Wildlife Control Consultant at gmail.com. Again, I'm Stephen Van Tassel, Wildlife Control Consultant. Back to you, Frank.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.